So, the No Coast is a complete standalone semi-modular synth. It looks nuts, and that's because it's not like a lot of the more classic analog synths that you perhaps are more familiar with. It actually works much more in the principle of Buchla synthesizers, where you start with a really simple waveform that becomes more complex, and then you've got various kind of shapers and modulators to change how that oscillator changes over time, timbrally. The No Coast lets you explore FM, wavefolding, and harmonic overtones. It's very elegant. I think it's really well thought out. Oh, and it's unbelievably small. So, obviously...
Hi, this is Crave from Behringer, a semi-modular analog monosynth based on their 3340 oscillator and ladder filter, with a single LFO and envelope, a sequencer, and a 32-jack Eurorack compatible patch bay, priced at around $200. Now, the market for analog synths at this price is getting pretty heated up, so let's see how Crave compares.
The Expert Sleepers ES8 is a USB audio interface in a Eurorack synth module. Simply connect the ES8 with a USB cable directly to your Mac or iOS device, and it appears as a 12-in 16-out audio interface. Ready to use for audio, control voltages, or both. Both inputs and outputs are DC coupled, meaning you can pass.
What do you think about this Eurorack setup? See something fishy? Well, more than half the modules here aren't really here. If you've been watching this channel, you've seen me go down the slippery slope of modular. But if you ask me what's the one must-have Eurorack module, it's none of what I've used so far. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen this on any must-have lists, but I think that ever since VC VRAC came out, the must-have lists need to change. Because it turns out combining virtual and hardware modules is actually quite simple. You see, modular can be very challenging if you don't have endless amounts of money to spend. So in my opinion, ever since the launch of VC VRAC and the explosion of the virtual modules that came with it, as well as a few interesting Softube modules, the one must-have module for your Eurorack setup is the one that will let you enhance it or try out new modules by bridging between the modules you have and need in hardware form and the virtual modules you might want to try out or may not want to purchase or can't afford in hardware form. In this video, I'll review two options for the integration of virtual and hardware Eurorack. One is the ES8 by Expert Sleepers, and another is the 8A interface by Motu. I think these two are the best ones you can pick from, and I'll talk about the pros and cons of each one and what to look for in terms of features if you want to try a different interface. Before I talk about them, let's check them out in action with a few sample use cases. I'll just clear up my virtual rack, and by the way, you can of course choose either interface. You don't need both of them. So let's start with something simple just to show how this works. First thing I need to add is an audio interface, and I'll choose the ES8 to start with. Then I'll take a module which in hardware form costs a lot of money, and here since we have a screen we don't necessarily need to buy one, a scope. And I'll take input number 1 from ES8 and drag it to the scope. Now we're not seeing anything yet because I haven't connected anything in the hardware. So here I'll take the output of, say, VCO2, plug that into input 1, and you can already see the result. And as I change the frequency of oscillator 2, you can see it reflected on the scope. Now the reason you can't hear this is because I haven't connected any output. Let's add another interface. Something really nice, by the way, about VCV is that you can add multiple audio interfaces. And here I'll add the Motu interface, and I have outputs 1 and 2 connected to the microphone here. Let's just do that. Let's add a mult. Let's go here. Connect this here, this guy to here, and the output to here. And we have it. We can actually make this stereo if we want. And now these two modules have basically become an integral part of this setup. You can see as I play with VCO2 frequency and shape on the Mini Brute 2S, it's immediately reflected on the scope. Fairly straightforward. Now let's try and build something more complex. So what I'm going to try and do now is build an air harp. I'm going to take this theremin, which I have no idea how to play accurately, move it through a quantizer to help me hit the right notes, and then create a virtual rings, then apply a real-world effect to it, and let's see how that works. So first thing I want to do is get CV from my theremin into my virtual rack so that I can process it. And that's as easy as taking a cable from the real world and plugging it into the virtual. Great, you can see now that as I move my hand towards the theremin, the voltage indication on the ES8 is changing from blue to red. So my hand is affecting voltage going into the ES8. You can also see this affecting the scope. Now I want my audio to come out through rings, so I'll go to here and put a resonator out. Let's feed that to the stereo outputs. Now, since modules are free, I also want this to be rhythmic, and JW has a great clock, so let's try that. And then take the gate out and apply it here. If you don't like this sound, I can always change it. Let's go with this. This is okay. Now I can go ahead and connect my voltage out to here. And now the theremin is directly controlling the pitch of the resonator. But it's not very musical. Remember, I can't play theremin. Luckily, a third-party developer called Amalgamated Harmonics developed the scale quantizer. And if we filter my bad theremin playing through it, let's choose a scale. Let's say this one. Take volt per octave out, drag it into here. Hopefully my new instrument is ready to be played. So that range is a little bit too much for me, but that's easy to fix. I'm going to put a VCA in the path that will give me a bit more control. Luckily, VCAs are free here too. And now, theremin players of the world, beware. There's a new player in town. Now, this module is actually one of my favorite modules. I'll do a full review about it later on, but let's try and pass the audio back into it and then back into your ears. Let's see how that works. So I'm going to map the outputs from rings back to, let's say, outputs 1 and 2 here. And we temporarily won't hear any audio. And let's go from 1 and 2 to the inputs of the ZDSP. And the fact that VCV exists doesn't mean there isn't a place for hardware modules. Obviously, the ZDSP is a great example of that. It's got fantastic reverb and a bunch of other things that you just currently can't do in software. Like I said, I'll cover that in a future review coming soon, so hit subscribe and the notification bell if you want to see that. But for now, let's stick to this. And I'm feeding the 2 stereo outputs of the ZDSP into inputs 3 and 4 on the ES8, which I now need to map to your ears. And do you see what we've done here? We're doing multiple round trips between virtual and modular and virtual and modular back again. And I think that going back and forth like this is very exciting.
Today we will have a look at the final version of the MIDI-LAR modules. The MIDI-LAR is a modular MIDI controller designed to work with VCV rack, but not only. A few months ago I made a video about the prototype, but this is the final product, so let's start. Okay, so first of all I want to thank my Patreons for supporting this channel. Thank you so much. And we will start with a short introduction of what is exactly the MIDI-LAR controller, and then we will see how it can work with VCV rack and also with reactor blocks and voltage modular. So as I said before, the MIDI-LAR is a modular MIDI controller. It connects to the computer with a USB cable. It's also powered through this cable. And for now, there are 3 types of modules. We have the It's Working module with the indication lights and the USB connection. We have the Starry Night module, I have it here also, which has 5 knobs, and it connects as an oscillator, LFO, mixer, and so on. And it's 8 HP wide. And we have a 2 HP module, Totem, which has 4 knobs, and it can act as a mixer, ADSR module, delay, and so on. And of course in the future there will come more modules, also with buttons and switches, so you will be able to choose what works best for you. As you can see, the MIDI-LAR modules can be mounted into a Eurorack case, so you can have virtual and analog right next to one another and control everything without even having to look at the screen. There are 2.
modules, all authentic reproductions of the original System 100 circuitry from 1975. And with its really fat sounding oscillators and creamy filters, the sound became famous in the early 80s by artists like Tears for Fears, Human League, Depeche Mode, but also Vangelis, Tangerine Dream and even Aphex Twin. The modules are extremely feature-rich, they come with many patching capabilities and a lot of them have dual functions, like the 112 dual oscillator, 3 waveforms, PWM and 2 sync modes, the 121 dual filter with a 3-channel mixer per filter, the 130 dual VCA, again dual 3-channel mixer. The 140 dual envelope has 3 outputs per ADSR plus built-in LFO that can be triggered and phase synced. The 173 gates module has even 4 gates that can switch audio and 6 quad buffered multiples. And the 297 has a dual portamento controller plus 2 independent CV mixers. I know this was fast, so I put more detailed information about the modules at the end of this video. Just click pause when your module comes up. Now, you could build a whole synthesizer with these modules, but you could also start small, maybe add 1 or 2 modules to your semi-modular synth, maybe an extra voice for your Model D, maybe a differently sounding filter for your Neutron, or maybe your Wasp needs a sequencer. Yes, sequencer, there are even more modules. The 150 brings a ring modulator, 2 noise generators, syncable LFO and a sample and hold generator. The 172 module, 6-step phase shifter, an analog delay, an LFO and a gate delay. The 305 is an output module with a 4-band parametric EQ, a 4-channel mixer, line and separate headphone outputs and even a tuning oscillator. And here's the sequencer, the 182. You can do either 1 to 16 steps or dual 8 steps. And there's tempo, portamento, gate time controls and more. And last but not least, the 110, and this is a complete synth voice in a single module with VCO, VCA and a filter. Now, before we go into the sound demos, let us know in the comments which type of modules you would like to see from us. And I know the topic of modular synthesizer can be a bit complicated for some, so if you have questions or if you want to see some specific tutorials, also let us know in the comments. Now let's hear some demos.
It's much more fun to control the cutoff with something that is this playable. And with the field kit, you have a DC interface, which enables control of a motor. For example, as in this Walkman. You can mod these yourself, Google pitch mod Walkman, and then use the ribbon controller and the field kit and the Walkman as a monophonic mellotron.
Tetrapad is a tactile Eurorack controller with 8 outputs, 4 pressable encoders, and pads that respond to both the position and pressure of your touch. It can behave in a number of different ways, including a bank of faders, a voltage storage device, a finger drumming surface, a chord generator, an 8-key keyboard, 4 independent LFOs, or an 8-switch panel. The different modes mean that the outputs can also behave in a number of different ways, so they're color-coded with LEDs to show what's going on. Pitch CV is shown with blue, gates and triggers with magenta, position in green, pressure in red, and other functions like LFOs and storage voltages are shown in cyan. Modes can be selected by pressing the white button and scrolling with any of the encoders, then either press any encoder or the white button to engage that mode. The first mode is fader mode. This gives you 4 pressure-sensitive faders, each generating CV based on the vertical position of your finger, as well as the pressure applied. Second is voltages mode. Now the pads are each split into top and bottom zones that can be assigned specific voltages to output from all 8 outs when activated. Mode 3 is keyboard mode. This turns Tetrapad into an 8-key keyboard, with each key capable of sending 4 different notes, along with position, pressure, trigger, and gate. Mode 4 is custom keyboard mode. This operates similarly to keyboard mode, only now you can choose specific notes for the 8 keys of a scale for each of the 4 outputs. Mode 5 is drum mode, which gives you 4 positionally sensitive drum pads for expressive finger drumming. Mode 6, LFO mode, turns Tetrapad into 4 independent LFOs, each with selectable rate, wave shape, and pressure control. Mode 7 is switches mode. Tetrapad becomes